How about a stuffed lobster? This is an expensive meal, but you know what? There's really nothing better. This is so much better than buying a steamed lobster. It may take a little while to prepare it, but if you do it and follow these directions, you will have the most delicious stuffed lobster ever. And the ingredients are all laid out for you on there. Shallots, garlic, fresh parsley, lump crab meat, panco breadcrumbs, salt, and I'm using Chef Paul Prudhomme's Cajun seasoning. I remember when I worked with him in New Orleans, he used to make his own in Commander's Palace, and of course I know how to make it. It's a little bit different than this one, but this one is still good. You must have a live lobster to do this. The first step is to set up the lobster, and that's what I'll be showing you next. Well, this is the most difficult part. Most people can't do this. So when you go and buy the lobster, ask him to just split it in half. And then take it home and you'll see what you do next on the video. Oh, but before I do this, I feel like a toreador or a matador with a bull. I have to drink some of the champagne that I'm using in the recipe to take care of this guy. And to be the most humane way of doing it is placing the knife just about over here, pushing down, straight down, and then coming forward, and then turning the knife around and taking the tail in half. So let's just do that. I think he's a goner already. And just flatten out the tail. You need a good sharp knife for this, and of course the larger the lobster, the heavier the shell is. Okay, now what's important here for the flavoring, you see this? We don't want to lose this. We need this when we do our sauteing with the crab meat, because this has an unbelievable amount of flavor. So we'll just get rid of a few bones here, and we'll take this, the corral or the tamale, take this out. We're saving that. Now also, you just remove the eye sac here. Remove this. And then we're ready to go to stuff this thing. Actually, the claw, has to be cracked. It's much easier later after it's cooked. So take the claw, place it like so. Got a good shot of this, yep. And just take a cleaver and crack it. That's it. It's cracked. Now we do the same thing with the other side, reserving all of this tamale, putting this in something to save it. The flavor in this is unreal, and you wouldn't get all the flavor if you would just leave it in there. You get more flavor out of it by sauteing this with the shallots and the garlic, and then stuffing the lobster. It is the most delicious. So you crack this claw also. As long as it's cracked like that, that's it. There was still a little movement in there. Okay. Now we are set. Now I'll show you the next step. I also removed the claws just so I can set this up easier. And you know what? The claw might take a little longer to cook than the lobster tail. Look at the thickness of that claw, and look at the meat that's in there. So I always leave the claws in for a few more minutes. Just take the claw off. Now we're going to leave the lobster like this, curled up. The next step is to make the stuffing. Now, I put a quarter cup of olive oil in there. If you want to use butter, that's fine. I'm using extra virgin olive oil. I just like it. We're going to saute the shallots, the garlic, and then I'll show you, and the tamale. Why we're using so much olive oil? Because we're going to place, and the garlic, I like biting into garlic, so I sliced it thin instead of mincing it up. If you don't like to do that, just mince it up. So there's the garlic and the shallots. Let that saute for a couple of minutes till it softens. We don't need to get color. Then I'm going to add the tamale and you'll see what happens to it. Since this is such an expensive dinner, it's going to be a lengthy video, and that's just how it is. Moderate flame. We'll get this going here. When we add the tamale, you'll see how it kind of disintegrates into the mix, but the flavor of it is outstanding. Even though we're making a stuffing and it's going to be seasoned, the crab meat, you still have to season the lobster tail. Remember, everything that's put together, everything has to be seasoned in order for the dish to come out tasty. Alright, a couple of minutes like this. Very nice. Translucent. And we're going to add the corral, the tamale. This is loaded with flavor. So you want to make sure that every ounce speck of it is used. Now you don't have to use what I'm using today, Cajun seasoning. You want to use whatever you want. You want to use salt and cayenne pepper or black pepper or put a little thyme, but I'm using that Cajun because it has a nice mix of herbs and spices. We're going to raise the flame on this. The flavor of this, I have another recipe where I work with shrimps and lobster, and I use this with the shrimps. But that's another involved recipe, but that is delish. I'll put a little Cajun in there. As always, the amounts of everything will be listed, so there's no guesswork for you, because that is usually the most difficult part of cooking for most people. It's how to season things. That's good. Now we'll add the crab meat. Like I said, I'm not being cheap on this recipe. This is expensive, but there's nothing better. And after this cooks for a minute, I'm going to add the panco breadcrumbs. And also, if you wanted to, which I'm not going to do, you could sprinkle some Parmesan cheese after the stuffing is done on top of the lobster, but I'm not doing that. I want to taste just the lobster. I'm not saying that you don't have to do that. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to put the champagne now, and the amount I'm using champagne only because I just happen to have a bottle of it floating around in the refrigerator, and I can't seem to find any dry white wine in the house, so I'm using some champagne, which is about the same. Now we'll add the panco. And the fresh parsley that I made. And we are done. Now we'll shut that off. Now the breadcrumbs absorb everything. It's not a very dry mix, it's nice and moist, which is good because when it comes out of the oven, we don't want crispy critters, do we? Now we'll give it a taste, and then we'll go about stuffing the lobster and putting it into the refrigerator or cooking it right away. Once you kill the lobster like this, there's no problem with having it in the refrigerator for many hours. But if you're going to do that, you'll let the stuffing cool down. The lobster is in the refrigerator now. Stuffing cools down, so the stuffing is cold, lobster is cold. You put them together, leave it in the refrigerator, and wait. This is the lobster after it's been cleaned. I set them up like this, curling the tails in, placing the bodies together like this. And we'll put this in the refrigerator, and then we will put the stuffing, the crab meat, in the refrigerator. And you may think it's a lot, but you know what? Actually, how much is there to eat there? This is not for one person, this is for 2 people. So the little bit of tail meat that's there, and the claw, certainly isn't enough for me. So with the stuffing, we got some nice meal. And when you put the crab meat away, spread it out nice and thin on a plate. Don't cover it up, and just put it in the refrigerator until it cools. Well, it's been about an hour. The stuffing is cool enough. So now, just like I said, season the lobster a little bit. I'm putting a little Cajun seasoning on the tail meat. It's too bad we can't season the claws, but that's life. That's it. Now I'll go about stuffing it. A lot of stuffing, and this is going to be a good dinner. I might have a little left over. So fill this cavity. Don't be cheap. Cover the tail completely. Also, the stuffing, you know what it does? It protects the tail meat. So the tail meat won't be dry. It'll be moist. A little bit more. Okay, so I went a little overboard with the stuffing because that really is enough for one. Then do the other one. Okay, now the lobsters are stuffed. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator, wait a few hours for dinner, and the excess is like a half a cup. What do you do with this? Easy. Get those little pastry cups using for hors d'oeuvres, either the phyllo ones or the ones made with pastry. Fill it with this and just heat it up and serve it as an hors d'oeuvre. You could freeze this until you're ready to use it. There's no problem with that. Don't be afraid of freezing things, just as long as you wrap it up nice and tight. Actually, what I'm going to do, put it on the plate and just go, delicious.